Hello and welcome to the Week 7 edition of the Base on Balls podcast. I'm your host, Cody. I am joined tonight by Paul and Connor. Paul, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good. Good to have you back, Cody. Taking the ship back over. Doing good on a 4-game win streak. So happy to get into it. Good to be back.
Absolutely. It's good to be back on the podcast. Connor, how are you doing tonight, man? Connor may be stuck on mute. There he goes. Connor, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm getting too cute with sticking on mute just because I like hearing you guys too much. Pretty good. I think a little bit of a disappointing week baseball wise, but there are reasons for that. Look forward to getting into them and everyone's week.
Absolutely. There is a lot to dive into. We had a action-packed week 7. I think the matchup that we need to talk about first probably wasn't expecting this one to be that interesting, but it turned out to be. Chad's Oklahoma City 89ers take down Dave's Rochester Red Wings 486 to 484. A 2-point game. It was a Sunday night comeback for Chad. Paul, dive in here. What did you see with this matchup?
Yeah, so it was Ha-Sung Kim, Sunday Night Baseball, I guess, was the difference in this matchup. But yeah, like crazy, kind of low scoring, with Chad and with Dave here. Just 2 points separated with the bats and 4 points separated with the arms. Just as close as you can get, basically. Pretty even matchup. I think Connor and I broke it down last week that we kind of thought this would be this close of a matchup. Definite highlight, I think, for this one was Paul Skeens dropping 51 on the Cubs, 11 strikeouts, 6 innings, got the win. Really good. I mean, that dude's going to be an absolute star in this league. Just another notch for Chad and his team, just of these young studs. But then for Dave, I mean, Dave's doing it right. I think like he's building. He's building, but also buying. He's getting a couple of these guys, a little bit older guys, but they're contributing, producing. He doesn't have the record yet to show exactly how good his team is. 1-6, obviously. It's not looking good for this year for him. But yeah, like Dave's got a good team, and I think he's going to be pretty dangerous.
For sure. I think an interesting thing to point out with this matchup, Kim had 22 points on Sunday Night Baseball to beat Dave, and he only had 32 points on the week. So all the production on Sunday was just enough to get Chad over the hump. Another thing to mention is you touched on with Paul Skeens. I mean, a second big league start, and he goes off for 51 fantasy points in it. Paul Skeens may already be one of the best pitchers in baseball. So, it's pretty crazy. I know Chad is happy to have him. And to touch on Dave real quick, you're right. Dave is doing it right. Dave will buy any pitcher that you put up there. And, it's working for him. Again, he's not really getting the wins from it yet, but Dave has been in every matchup he's played in this year, which is a huge step forward from last year. So, I think he's still got more pieces of the puzzle he's working on, but, he's got a good platform to work on at this point. Connor, what did you see in this matchup?
The main thing I think I want to point out to start is how close it was in each aspect. The hitting was 294 to 292 in Dave's favor. The pitching was 194 to 190 in Chad's favor. I do want to commend Dave for buying all the pitching. Last week's podcast theme was literally shout out Dave. But 190 points pitching compared to 240 last week is not what he's hoping for. So if that pitching can stay around 230, 250, I think that those wins are going to keep coming for Dave. And as for Chad, he's had a rough schedule, and this may not be the hot start, but this win is a very good start to what could be a playoff run.
Absolutely believe that Chad is going to have his team in a position to battle for a playoff spot. And I think that kind of his two-headed monster at pitching with Yamamoto and Skeens is going to help him in that race. We will move on now to my matchup. Bowling Green Hot Rods take down the Bismarck Larks 705 to 456. Paul, you can kind of go first. What did you see with this matchup?
So clearly the highlight here, Braxton outscored your bats, Cody, by 22 points.
Yeah.
Like that's definitely the highlight, because we've been talking about it forever about Braxton and his youth movement, but I mean 20 out of Giancarlo Stanton. I know he's not in Bismarck anymore, but I mean that's the type of bat where you're going to get consistency and you kind of know what you're going to get. You're going to get 20, 30 points. Those are the bats that Braxton should be targeting, in my opinion, because they can lead to a 320 plus point performance in a week. Obviously, he's got a lot of work to do with his arms, but even still, he only had 10 starts, 133 points. It's not ideal. Bullpen was decent. He only had one really blow up start with Joey Lucchesi, but I mean, yeah, like that. He has good arms. It's or he has arms that need to be better, pitch better, but that's kind of where he should start maybe focusing and stop selling bats like Giancarlo Stanton for a single worst. But I mean, Braxton obviously knows what he's doing, because he's starting at least to get some return out of those young bats. 29 for Jackson Churio. Hopefully he's getting to be better. 40 out of Volpe. So yeah, I mean, obviously Ellie 35. Obviously you want more out of Ellie, but obviously it's going well for him. And then Cody, I know you'll talk about your team a good amount. For me, it's just another day, another dollar. 404 points from the arms. That's just insane. So yeah, like obviously, Cody, your team was better. Your team was always going to win this matchup. But good on Braxton for outscoring with the bats.
For sure. And Connor, what did you see with this matchup?
So Paul is a big fan of analyzing the bullpens as kind of a differentiator, and we know going into this that Cody was going to beat Braxton, but in between Mason Miller, Emmanuel Clase, Camilo Duvall, and Daniel Hudson, Cody's arm scored over 100 points. If that continues for some of the more high-profile matchups, I think that is going to be a nightmare for the league. And then for Bismarck, Craig Kimbrell had a kind of bounce-back week, so maybe he is held on to solidify an older pitching staff going forward or be traded off for some assets. Kind of hit or miss streaming from Braxton's pitching, but yeah, 323 offensive points. That is going to catch eyes. Anthony Volpe 40, Ellie De La Cruz 35, Terang 35, Stevenson 33. Those are all bats that you can either build around or adjust as needed. So I think there are definitely some signs of life in Bismarck, but Cody's team does what Cody does.
Yeah, for me, definitely happy with the pitching performance. 404 points is big. And I always try to find, like, look at the week and see, like, what went wrong, what went right. One thing that stands out to me is, Glass now with a 10-point start. Dylan Cease gave me 15 points last week, and Verlander gave me 0. That's 25 points between all three of those guys, and I still scored 404 points. So I think even at 404 points, there's more room for my pitching to kind of grow on that. And they're going to have to, because my bats are definitely mediocre. I think I've got a lot of high ceiling, big name guys that just don't quite produce on a consistent basis right now offensively. That's one reason why I brought in Freddie Freeman. But the pitching's going to have to carry. I have to rely on that week in and week out, and it did this week. So I was definitely happy to get the win. But again, I do think Bracton. I think the team's moving in the right direction. I just think, as we say every podcast, he's got to get some consistency out of the pitching because it is not there right now. We will move on to talk about Smell gets in the win column. The El Paso Chihuahuas take down the Amarillo Sod Poodles 558 to 531. I think this is titled, is it the Good Boy Bowl? Is that what we call this?
It's the Good Boy Bowl.
The Good Boy Bowl. Smell takes the Good Boy Bowl. Connor, I'll let you go first. What did you see with your matchup here?
Yeah, so shout out to Smell. Last podcast, I said that I would win even if Smell wasn't out of the country, and Smell's team proved me wrong. I was winning at a decent clip Monday through Friday, and then Saturday night, I was barely paying attention to baseball scores. I look up and Smell scores 150, 160 points on me. His team came back in a great way and clinched it on Sunday. 558 points would have beaten quite a few teams this week. 531 is a little bit shorter than I'd have liked after my win against Omco, but 297 points from the bats and a couple buy lows I had went well. Pitching having 234 with only 8 or 9 starts, that's what I want to see. So if and when I buy more pitchers, I think the team's looking up. But shout out to Smell, Ben Brown, Pete Fairbanks, Jared Schuster, his relievers went out. Only 1 or 2 pitching bombs, and hitting wise, he's just had some crazy performances. Ezekiel Tovar with 51, Ty France with 36, and what seems like his first good week this year. So shout out the Chihuahuas for winning this Good Boy Bowl.
Yeah, I think with Smell, he's taking it on the chin on quite a bit of these podcasts, because of where his team is at. But, as I kind of glance down here and I look and I say, if he's got Javier Assad, Tanner Bibby, Hunter Brown, Alec Manoa seems to be back, Reese Olson, those are some big-time young pitchers that could turn this thing around pretty quickly. For Smell, I think if he could drop Bryce Elder, I think his stock goes way up. Just getting him off the roster would be a big time improvement for the Chihuahuas. But that's something Smell's got to reconcile with himself. But Connor, you led all week. When you got to the weekend, I think you made a couple sail offs. Jordan Montgomery comes to mind. Michael Lorenzen. I think, again, Connor's probably playing the long game here. Team's probably not ready to compete for a playoff spot. So some pieces got sold, and Smell ended up taking advantage of that and getting the win. So, yeah, congrats are in order for Smell. Paul, what did you see in this matchup?
Yeah, I'm not going to dig too hard into my guy Connor here, but moving Lorenzen and moving Jordan Montgomery, their 2 starts on Sunday, I think it was, combined for 30 points, and Connor lost by 27. So I know, and Cody just said it. Connor's playing the long game, and the pieces that he got, I'm sure he'll flip or keep and turn them into good pieces. I get it. It's just, for me, it's so hard to just literally have a win potentially, and obviously you don't know if it's a win or not. Maybe those guys blow up and it doesn't matter. But it's hard for me to just say, "Oh, I'm good to just lose," because again, it's just not me. I did it a lot last year and the year before. Like, losing, it stinks. I hate it. So yeah, I'm not going to go too hard on Connor here, but the one I do want to look at real quick for Smell is Alec Manoa. I mean, Alec Manoa now I think has 2 starts in a row where so 28 in his last start, and then this week he dropped 45. I mean, we're talking about a guy that was in rookie ball, I think at this time last year, because he was just so broken to the point that the Blue Jays were like, all right, we're restarting from scratch. And it seems to have worked, and it seems that he can actually pitch in this era of baseball with the pitch clock and all of that. I mean, I commend Smell a lot because everyone was kind of saying, "Oh, just drop him. Oh, he'll never pitch again in the pros." And Smell stuck with him, and he's finally seeing those benefits. But otherwise, obviously, really close with the bats. Arms were the difference in this one, 36-point difference, and that was pretty much the difference in the game.
For sure. And a one word answer. I'm going to pose a question to you two guys. One word answer. Is Alek Manoah back?
Yes.
Connor.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. We will move on now to the next matchup. Hen Dog with a statement victory. Clearwater Beach Dogs take down the Nashville Sounds 747 to 622. Again, looking at this matchup, this was a big statement for Hen. He'd taken a couple losses in a row. Really complete team performance. 406 points from the bats. 341 points from the arms. Outside of Alexi Diaz, with the Reds kind of just shit in the bed, for no better way to put that. Hen Dog really, really had a complete team performance. I know it felt good to get back in the win column for him. Connor, what did you see in this matchup?
Yeah, Hen was 3-3, if I'm not mistaken, and absolutely needed this. 406 points from the bats, that is absolutely elite level, and 341 pitching points, complete performance. Alexis Diaz minus 21 didn't stop him. Grayson Rodriguez had a very nice start back after an injured list, and Chris Sale has looked terrific. I think these are pieces that will help Hen continue as I would say, consensus top 5 team still. PETA had a solid effort, 622 points, balanced to hitting and pitching to a decent extent. But the one limitation with the Sounds this year, and really PETA's style, is kind of the cap on points. I think the highest scored this year against Titan was 675. So one thing I'll be looking out for in the weeks to come is, can the Sounds eclipse 700 points? If so, I think they're going to make a very deep run. If not, I could see them being in early bounce from the playoffs.
Yeah, I think with Tita's team, and the kind of the way that he maneuvers and manages his team, I do feel like that it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because I think on one hand it keeps him involved in any matchup, no matter who he's playing, just by constantly moving pieces in and out based on what he needs that week. But I think it also puts a ceiling on what his team can do too. And like, for example, this week, the offense scores 365 points. That's good enough to win, but the pitching lays an egg at 257. And you kind of dissect on, what that's about, and you see that he's moving in and out a lot of different guys. And there's some negative performance in there. Ryan Nelson with a minus 14. Chris Bassett didn't give him much, a 7-point start. Looks like Cole Irvin actually got moved out of the Orioles bullpen there. He had 10 points in 2 innings pitched. But, yeah, there was just, a lot of the moving in and out, I do think kind of caps Tito right here. So it is going to be interesting to see kind of what he does moving forward. Paul, what did you see in this matchup?
Yeah, I think you both actually hit the nail on the head. With Tita's maneuvering, I do think there is a ceiling to what he can do in any given week. And I think that ceiling is right around 620, 650, which, a lot of weeks that's probably good enough to win. But when you're facing the top teams in this league, and I think Hen is still one of those teams, it's maybe good enough, maybe not good enough. And, being maybe good enough in September if you're in the playoff race in that playoff, or you're just in the playoffs, it probably isn't going to get it done. So Tita obviously is a great owner. He loses some trades, he wins some trades. It's what it is. He self admits that. It's kind of a roll of the dice any given week, I think, for Tita. Because 365 out of the bats. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Tita's bats. It's the arms. But one arm I did want to talk about real quick, Jose Soriano for the Angels. I think it was a week or maybe 2 weeks ago that Tita had said that he sees ace-like qualities in Soriano. And at the time I laughed at it, but I mean, if you look at his last few starts, 30 points, 10 points, 23 points, 36 points. I mean, it's hard to argue with that, especially on a bad team like the Angels are a bad team. Like, he's doing pretty well. And I wouldn't say necessarily that he's an ace, but he's definitely a guy that if you look, Tita hasn't moved him since he got him. I think he got him from Bracton. Or if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But
it was Bracton.
Okay. So he hasn't moved that arm. And I think with Tita, who basically his entire team is on the block, I think there's a reason. And I think that's a good piece for Tita to hang on to try and build his value up, because I think at the moment, at least, his value is only going to go up. So, as for Hen, 341 from the arms, 406 from the bats, just an insane performance. His team's really good. His bats came to play this week. So yeah, I mean, just, for me at least, 12 points out of Ronald Acuna, though. Just real quick, Ronald Acuna really not having the best of years so far. So with Acuna playing as bad as he has been, and hence still be scoring that high, to me it just says how good his team is. And once Acuna gets it going, because I think we can all agree that he'll get it going. I mean, watch out, because that team is dangerous as is with a bad Acuna. So it's even worse with a good Acuna.
For sure. And as always, win or lose, all eyes will be on Tita and what moves come next from the Nashville Sounds. We'll move on and talk about Paul getting the monkey off his back. A little revenge against Scott. The Norfolk Tides take down the Richmond Flying Squirrels 659 to 522. Paul, jump in here, man. How did it feel to get the win this week?
Yeah, it was good. Always happy to get a win, no matter who it is. Obviously, Scott and I have history, and I think it's my first win against Scott in this league, because I think I went 0-2 against him last year, and obviously last year being the first year for him in this league. But I mean, I'm going to sound like Cody here. I'm just a little bit down on my team, just a little bit. I think I only got like 5 points out of my bullpen for the entire week. And as I've said on every podcast I've been on this year, bullpens are what separates good teams from great teams. And at least for this week, my bullpen was really bad. Plus, you have Diaz and the news that he's temporarily been removed from the closer role for the Mets. I mean, it's tough sledding for me. I think it was late Sunday, late last night, or late Saturday night, I got David Bednar to maybe try and help me out a little bit. But even he's been pretty shaky this year. So I mean, my team, I think, goes as far as my bullpen takes it, which is a scary thought. But I mean, other than my bullpen, I was pretty pleased overall with my team. Gunnar Henderson has just been an absolute dog. I love him. He's my favorite player. Not moving anywhere anytime soon. But then as for Scott and his team, real quick, Bryson Stott had an amazing week. Bryce Harper had an amazing week. But he was under 300 with the arms and with the bats. I know that part of that is he went over the start limit, so he had to lose his Sunday start, Brady Singer. I mean, he was out of the country though, so we don't really necessarily blame him too much. I get it. It's hard to check your lineup. But yeah, I mean, Scott, even with losing 39 points, 522 for the week, I mean, that's really solid. And obviously, he's got a good team. I think it's coming up pretty quick. So yeah, I think it'll surprise some people.
Yeah, I'll say this, about Scott's team. Out of all the teams that I think when if we draw a line in the sand and we say we're going to put all these teams over here on the left that are for sure playoff contenders and all the other teams on the right, I think right now Scott is probably on the right. But to me, he feels the closest to jump across that line. And I think kind of looking at this week and breaking it down, he did fail to reach 300 points with either offensively or pitching, but he was really, really close at both. He's kind of right on that line of kind of eclipsing where he needs to be every week. And I think he's further ahead pitching wise than a lot of those other teams on the right. I think offense is so much easier to kind of come by. And I think, his offense is kind of already there right at 293, 300 even. I mean, I think you can win with that if you can get your pitching there. And I think Scott is probably closest to getting his pitching there. He lost the Brady Singer start on Sunday because he went over. That was a really good start. Michael King was really bad this week for him when normally he's been really strong for him. Jordan Hicks has been huge for him. I just think Scott's really close to kind of crossing that line there and joining the playoff contenders. In terms of Paul, man, it was a rough start to the season, 0-3. You've been a world beater ever since. This week was really no different. I did the math the best I could because you did have several relievers, and I think all your relievers combined went for 6 points.
Yeah.
If my math is correct. That's with Kyle Muller, AJ Puck, David Bednar, Cruz, Diaz, Duran, and Griffin Jacks. So that was tough. That was probably the one downfall. If your relievers were even average, you would have broke 700. So, really strong week. I do want to mention I gave you shit. I think a lot of people did. I think you've given yourself shit for trading Tovar for Ryan Weathers. What did you do, Paul? I think you got a little bit of a pitcher in Ryan Weathers.
I wish I still had him.
You traded him?
Yeah, we'll get to it, but yeah.
Oh, no, you traded him to Bracton.
Yeah.
We will get to that. Okay. But, yeah, 2 good starts out of George Kirby. It looks, one good start and one bad one. That's kind of how George Kirby's season's gone. But, yeah, getting Taj Bradley back and healthy looks like it's paying dividends. But I think the Tide are kind of clicking on all cylinders right now, minus the relief pitching. And, Paul's going to be a really, really tough team. Definitely a playoff contender. I think where Paul's at right now is trying to make the jump from, say, 4th best to getting in the top 3. I think he's right on that line of jumping in with the top 3. And weeks like this, the last 4 weeks, have really shown that. Connor, let you go now. What did you see in this matchup?
Well, I was going to allot my time to Paul for him to gloat about his team, but that has not happened. I will say one player I'd like to point out for the Tides, Brian Reynolds, scored the same amount of points as Gunnar Henderson, the presumptive AL MVP favorite. I think that was a really smart acquisition and nailed down an outfield that kind of had some struggles. Randy Rosarrain at 20 points and 31 at bats. That's not what Paul is going for. And then for Scott, currently, I believe he is 9th. So in the league, Chad would be the first team out of the playoffs and Scott would be the second. It will be fascinating to see how those two battle with the 6 and 7 seeds as the middle of the season hits.
For sure. I think as this season progresses, that kind of range from like 5th, 6th best to 8th, 9th best, those little cluster of teams right there, it's going to be really interesting to see who kind of steps forward and who falls back. We will move on now to talk about a absolute heavy hitter matchup. John Heights Hartford Yard Goats take down Jab's Portland Sea Dogs 787 to 668. John Height led the league in scoring this week. Height looks back. It feels like he's back. I definitely don't want to see him come up on the schedule. Paul, I'll let you kind of jump in here. What did you see with this matchup?
So to kind of continue what we had talked about, what Connor and I had talked about last week on the pod when we were doing the prediction for this game, it was Carlos Rodon and it was Corbin Burns who had the 2 start weeks, and they combined for 126 points, just the two of them, over 4 starts, of course. But I mean, to me, that's kind of your difference in the matchup. John Height had 375 with the arms, and Jab had 311 with the arms. I mean, that's 64 points if my math is right. That's about half of what the difference ended up being. But then obviously you look at John Height's bats. I mean, it's just crazy. Like Aaron Judge finally seems to have turned the corner. He's getting it going a little bit. 3 home runs this week. But then you have smaller guys like a Jock Peterson who had 13 points. And obviously now he's, in free agency. But just, smart little ads like that really add up, in my opinion. They really can get you over that hump. And in John Height's case, got him over the 400-point hump for bats. So obviously his team's really good. There's not a whole lot more to say there. As for Jab, it's really hard to say that he did bad because he definitely didn't do bad at all. 357 and 311 from the bats and the arms. Well over 300 points. 668 is good enough to beat. I think it was good enough to beat probably more than half the teams in the league this week. He just kind of got messed up by the schedule. It happens. It's tough to waste the shutout that Aaron Nola had this week. But obviously it kept him in the matchup. And I would expect Jab to win more of these going forward.
For sure, yeah. Jab would have actually beaten 10 other teams this week. The only teams he would not have beaten was John Height, Hendog, and myself. So, yeah, Jab definitely has nothing to hang his head with this matchup. John Height is just, again, like I said when I opened here, the Yard Goats are back. Nobody's sleeping on the Yard Goats. If they were, they're definitely not now. Connor, what did you see in this matchup?
I do want to follow up on Paul's point about the numerous additions Heights made to the team. Jock Pearson with 13, and I think in general, John's just more aggressive going on the waiver wire. Jab is very confident in his team and locks them in. Just scrolling through the players that played, I think Mike Talkman's the only person that immediately screams at the screen. So I think that with this league of stars, the value of these additions can be underwritten, but they add up. And one concern I want to raise for Jab's team might be the pitching department. Aaron Nola had a complete game shutout, a 71-point start. If that had not been the case, the Sea Dogs would be under 300 points pitching, which is kind of the barometer for being an elite team. So, of course, Portland's had quite a few pitching injuries, but I think Height showed that he's going to be at the top of the class as he should be, and maybe Jab has some further refining to do for that more 700-point consistency.
For sure. And we will get to our last matchup of week 7. Braz Rocky Mountain Vibes take down Homco's Rocket City Trash Pandas 658 to 578. So Homco did keep it within 100 points barely. I guess that's like an 80-point differential there. Connor, I'll kind of reverse it right back to you. What did you see with this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, the last couple weeks, I think Humco's mostly been around the 570, 580 range. 297 points for the pitching. That is pretty good. John Means had a quality start. Sonny Grays looked decent. Sean Manaea with 48. And the hits just keep coming. But I want to say this matchup speaks more to the resiliency of Bryce. Team 658 points almost seems like a down week for a team that I almost associate with this point for like 690, 720. 359 points from the bats, 299 from the pitching. Bullpens locked it down in between Foley, Helsley, and Suarez. I think this team's in for a long run, and let's see what further moves are made.
Yeah, agreed. When I look at Bry's team, I would consider this a down week for Bry. I think he's kind of consistently been close to 700 or above it the last couple weeks. So coming in around 650 has got to be a kind of a letdown. The offense was played well, 359 offensively. I think the arms at 299 is probably where he lacked a little bit. But he got big starts from Tariq Skubal and Cole Raggins. Jesus Luzardo was really good for him as well. Christian Javier had a great start. I think Bry's team is fine. I mean, if 650 is a down week, I think you're doing some things right. As for Homko, you look at this, and I think, the pitching is probably fine, if not a little more than fine. I think he's got to find a way to get some offensive production. 281 is definitely not, where he needs to be. I think the names on paper are better than that. I just think he may have to, kind of wait out some real guys that are slumping. Gleyber Torres has been terrible this year. Castellanos has been, not that great this year. There's some pieces here, but Homko's definitely got to get some more offensive production to really be a true contender here. Paul, what did you see with this matchup?
So first thing I'll say, Vinny Pasquantino drops 2 points in 19 at-bats. Obviously not what you would normally expect. Julio Rodriguez, 24 points in 25 at-bats. So I think that mostly just speaks to exactly what you guys said, that Bry probably had more of a down week and probably not the norm, more of a abnormality. Because then you look at his pitching, Pablo Lopez, 9-point start, Freddie Peralta, 2-point start. You're going to get more than that out of those guys typically. So yeah, I think when you look at Bry's team, I think 658 is probably on the lower end for him. And even still, he got to win by 80 points. So that kind of tells you exactly what his team's like. But then for Homko, I mean, it's just the year, I guess now back-to-back years of tough sledding. Like 578, it's not the best score, but it's a competitive score. But then exactly, I think you guys were nailed it on the head that his pitching, I think, is pretty good. It's good enough, at least. I mean, he matched Bry in pitching. He only was down by 2 points, 299 to 297. So, yeah, I mean, is it the best? I guess you could maybe argue it is, because 281, it's a little bit lower than you would expect for a good competitive team. But then you look at the names. I mean, Alec Boehm, Campusano was decent. Teoscar Hernandez, Michael Harris, Nick Castellanos, Jaron Duran. I mean, Schwarber. Like these are guys that you should be able to count on for 20, 30 points in a week, and he's just not getting it. Which is crazy because I had Duran on my team earlier this year, and I think I got at least 30, 40 points a week out of him. And then he gets to Homko and only drops 22. Like, again, I said it last week. I said it the week before. If I'm Homko, I don't have any hair left because I've pulled it all out. Like, and his schedule isn't the best. Like, he keeps getting messed with the schedule. Like, yeah, it's tough.
For sure, and that will wrap up our week 7, review, and we will jump into everybody's favorite part of the Base on Balls podcast, where we discuss the trades from the week. Per normal, This was an action-packed week on the trade market. And we start off with back on, looks like this was Monday morning. Bracton trades. So Bracton gets, Tink Kent's and Drew Jones. Tita gets Zach Neto, David Festa, Jarlin Susana, and DJ Hers. Connor, jump in here. What do you think about this move?
I think this is a bet for Bracton on Tink Hence, and that's not really a dumb one. I think Hence is an electric arm and really has a clear path to pitching for the Cardinals sooner than later. But I think Tita did a terrific package here. David Festa is a solid arm in the Twins organization who may not be the flashiest, but seems like a safe-ish 3 or 4 starter. Zach Neto is nothing to laugh at, and Jarlin Susana and DJ Hers are 2 more arms. So I can see it from both sides, but I really like Tita's get here.
And Paul, any thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, I mean, my analysis is almost exactly the same as Connor's. I will say Tink Hence, I do like him as an arm. I do like him as a prospect. He does have that bullpen risk. So while I think overall in this deal, I think he's probably the best player, there is definite risk with him. Drew Jones, obviously, I've said my piece. I think on Drew Jones, I think his stock has just plummeted so far that it's going to be tough for him to get it back. Obviously, he does have the pedigree to get it back. But yeah, and then Neto, I've said what I think about Neto. Festa is a good arm, like Connor said. Not the flashiest, just probably a good safe bet to be a major league player. Then the other 2 are near worse for me. So I do tend to lean a little bit towards Tita, but I do think Bracton got the best player.
For sure, yeah. I don't see a lot of bullpen risk in Tink Kent's. I know I understand the industry has kind of quoted that when talking about him. I think it's a huge get for Bracton here. Really high upside arm, and that's the kind of pieces that Bracton needs. So really like the move for Bracton there. The next trade we'll talk about, I find pretty interesting. Bry gets Luis Arias. Tita gets Michael Bush and Brett Witrowski. Connor, I'll let you go. What do you think about this small little trade here?
I don't know if it's a small little trade. Luis Arias is a batting champ. I'm not the biggest on Arias. I think he can be a little bit polarizing for fantasy. I can see why Tita did this deal for sure. Michael Bush is a talented now first baseman with second base eligibility, and Brett Witkowski, I know Tita's a big fan of. He's in the Brewers organization, if I remember right, and they just breed arms. So I think Bry got the best player, but it's a solid package back.
And Paul, what did you think about this move?
Yeah, Luis Arias, obviously former batting champ, but I think he's been quoted in this league as a singles merchant. And so far, at least this year, I think his batting average is around 280 or so. So he's not getting enough singles to be that guy. I mean, overall, I think he's, a pretty solid bat, definitely worth what he got, or what he gave up, I should say. I really like Michael Bush, though. I don't know that he's ever a star, but he's just a really solid bat as well. So if those 2 cancel out, then Brett Witrowski, Brewers pitcher, really been kind of out of nowhere a little bit this year. But obviously just a really good pitcher, fast rising pitcher, in a good system, in my opinion. So I do favor Tita here as well. That's 2 for 2 for Tita if you're keeping score at home, as opposed to last week where I think Connor and I said that Tita lost every trade that we analyzed. So I think, I like this one for Tita.
Yeah, I want to put a little tidbit in here. It's pretty interesting because Tita and I had been talking the Von Grissom trade that we made today for about 5 or 6 days off and on. And every time I mentioned Brett Wikrowski, however you say his last name. Every time I mentioned him, Tita just completely ignored it and talked about other players. That's not common with Tita, so I think there is something there. I think Tita is pretty high on him because normally Tita, when it comes to prospects, is burning and churning there on the trade market, but wasn't too willing to move him in the Von Grissom trade. So yeah, I think both sides are happy with that move. The next trade we'll talk about is Paul, the prodigal son, returns home. He gets Kevin Gossman and Chase Petty, kind of two prodigal sons there, if you know Paul. And Tita gets Jordan Montgomery and Caden Dana. Paul, let you go. I know Dana's not someone you were amped to trade away. What was your thoughts with this move?
Yeah, that's an understatement. Caden Dana, I think, was, at least my intention was for him to be a lifelong Tide. But Tita and I were talking, getting into it. The bottom line here is I really wanted Kevin Gossman. I like his stuff. I like his, abilities. Jordan Montgomery's gotten off to a slow start. I think eventually he'll be all right. But obviously with missing spring training, his contract situation, this and that. I really wanted to get in a good start this week out of Gossman and going forward. And for me, Chase Petty and Caden Dana are pretty close in value. So I mean, the stipulation I feel like carried a lot of weight in this trade. I wanted just a little bit of insurance just because Gossman, he pitched I think 30 starts last year or so, but in the past he's had maybe missing a few starts here and there. I just wanted that little bit of insurance to just make me feel better. But overall, as you said, I like Kevin Gossman a lot. Former Oriole, wish he was still in the Orioles. But yeah, Kevin Gossman is kind of one of the guys that I've always been intrigued with, and I'm happy to have him back.
For sure. And Connor, if you have any thoughts on this move?
I do like the get for Paul. Jordan Montgomery is just such a weird piece to me because he does seem like kind of a reverse ticking time bomb. At some point, you expect a 20-point starter in there, but given when he signed in the new environment, when does he get to that? Gosman is a top three Cy Young finalist. Chase Petty's a great pitcher, as is Caden Dana. So I do like this for Paul, but also think that Tita got an arm he really covets. So I guess we're 2 for 3 for Tita at this point.
Interesting. Tita getting a little love on this podcast, out of the norm. We will move on now to talk about Tita gets Kyle Schwarber and 3 2025 fourth round picks. Comco gets Yu Darvish and Lourdes Gurriel. This is an interesting trade for me. The kind of an old fashioned fantasy baseball trade. None of these guys have a ton of value. Most, they're all, 30 years or older. I like that Homco was kind of stepping out here and getting a pitcher in Yu Darvish, who's, Yu Darvish is healthy. He's going to pitch well, regardless of how old he is. And, Tita got the best bat in the deal. I think Kyle Schwarber is drastically better than Lourdes Gurriel, who has cooled off. Me and Connor was actually talking before this pod at how much Lourdes Gurriel has cooled off. He hadn't hit a home run since like April the 17th. So I do think Tita come out well with getting Kyle Schwarber here, but I do like Homco getting Yu Darvish. Paul, do you have any thoughts on this move?
Yeah, same thing. I like Homco getting Yu Darvish. Going out getting a pitcher. Obviously, not a young pitcher. I think he's 39. But just a really solid pitcher, and obviously, as we kind of talked about with Homco's team, he needs that pitching. So, it's hard to say that I love it for Homco because I think Kyle Schwarber is a really good bat as well. Plus those 3 fourth-round picks, I'm sure Tita, if he hasn't traded them by now, I'm sure he'll trade them at some point and get something nice out of them. So, I mean, present deal, looking at it, I do like it for Hamko because getting that pitcher will mean a lot for his team.
For sure. And Connor, any thoughts with this move?
Yeah, I think I go Homko here because Yu Darvish has turned in another great start, and when he falls off, I'm sure it'll be tough. But 325 force for him is not terribly much, and then Schwarber for Gurriel. Schwarber is like the ultimate Tita player, so I think this trade made sense for both sides. But I think this is a great Homko shakeup.
For sure. And moving on now to Bracton, who I think pulled a masterclass in this move. Bracton doesn't get a lot of love in the trade talks on podcasts, but I really like this trade for Bracton. And keep in mind that I think Chris Paddock is almost a zero. But Bracton gets Chris Paddock, Tamar Johnson, and Ryan Clifford. Jab gets Andrew Abbott. Paul, what do you think about this move?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this was a great move for Bracton. I value Chris Paddock a little bit more than a zero. In fact, Paddock and Abbott, I don't think are terribly far apart. I would definitely favor Abbott, but I mean, Abbott, I feel like he came up last year, set the league on fire a little bit. But if you look at him this year, he hasn't been like that great. Like he's been fine. I just worry that eventually he's going to potentially move out of that rotation. I mean, obviously, injuries happen. He could stick around for a while. I'm just not entirely sold. But then also on top of Paddock, Bracton getting Tamar Johnson and Ryan Clifford. I like both of those guys quite a bit. They're both pretty consensus top 100 guys. I like the power potential with Clifford, and then with Tamar Johnson, there's potential. He's the top second base prospect going into next year. So I do agree. I like it a lot for Bracton.
And Connor, any thoughts with this trade?
I do think Braxton's the winner, but I do want to note the variant in a lot of these pieces. And of course, with any prospect, that's going to be the case. Tamar Johnson is the consensus top second base prospect, but this year he's sold out for power a little bit. So I'm very curious to see at the end of the season if he can continue to raise the stock like he did in 2023. And Chris Paddock is a man who, with one start, strikes out 10, and the next start gives up 12 hits. If he returns to his 2019 form, I think Braxton's the easy winner in the deal, but I could also see where Abbott's the steady arm that Jab needs.
For sure. We will move on now to a very, very interesting trade, in my opinion. TD gets Marcelo Mayer and George Springer. Height gets Colton Cowser and Jarrell Perez. I'll just kind of jump in here on my thoughts with this move. First thing that comes to my mind, really interesting to see Height go after a guy like Colton Cowser. He's kind of angled for more the 28 to 32-year-old range bat that's, producing at their best level right now. I think Colton Cowser is a guy he's going to have to be a little patient with. I know that sometimes his stock gets really high and people's like, he's going to be an elite player. And then sometimes it falls really low and people start calling him a fourth outfielder for the Orioles. So my bet is he ends up kind of somewhere in between there. I think he's going to be a really good player. I don't know if he's ever going to reach elite status. But TD gets, a consensus, I would say, top 20 prospect. Some guys may have him a little higher in Mayer. And George Springer, who's really interesting because there's no other way to put it. George Springer's been terrible this year, but so is every other one of the Toronto Blue Jays offensive players. Springer's a guy that I'm going to bet on figures it out rather than bet against him long term. Just a really good hitter. So I do see, I do think I would probably side with Tita here. I think he got a guy in Springer that can be really productive for him down the stretch and a high-end prospect. In Mayer for Colton Cowser, who feels a lot like a wild card. for me personally. Paul, I'll let you jump in. What did you think with this move?
I mean, yeah, once again, that's basically my exact analysis. I mean, I said Colton Cowser basically since I traded him. I don't remember what it was for. I think it was to Tita, but I mean, yeah, he has that wide range of outcomes. I feel like where yeah, he could be that really good all-star potential player, or like I mean, I think you saw that line for me that fourth outfielder for the Orioles. Um, but I do like that type of player for John Haidt simply because, like you said, he's been more rostering the 28 to 32 year olds, and he needs to figure out a way to get younger quick because when you roster a lot of 30-plus-year-old players, you're gonna find that your window is gonna close, and without any sort of farm system to speak of for John Haidt, it's gonna end and it's gonna end quick, and the fall is gonna be very hard. But when you get guys, they're 25, and I mean he is a productive player. I'm not gonna say he's not. That kind of makes that transition a little bit easier, and it keeps your window open. So I do think that Tita did better in this trade. I don't want to break down a whole lot because I think he traded Mayer like an hour later. But I do like Tita's side in this one.
And Connor, what are your thoughts with this move?
On concept, I like the move for Height getting a younger outfielder to take over when some of the older guys are. I think Tita is the winner in terms of pure value. Just Hauser, I think maybe I'm a little bit lower on him, but I think his value's inflated given his first 30 or 40 at bats. He's cooled off noticeably since. So I'm a big Mayer guy, and yes, he was moved later, but I think Tita got a productive old outfielder and a spec that he could move for later. So I get it for Height, but prefer the Tia side.
Yeah, and now Braxton, if you're listening, just pull your headphones out and come back in about 8 minutes because man, I couldn't hate this trade more for you. Tita gets Colt Keith, Shea Langoliers, and Jose Soriano. Braxton gets Marcelo Mayer and Tyler Stevenson. Um, I'll dive into this one first, guys. I just see nothing about this trade that would make Braxton want to do it. Um, Colt Keith is a guy that I think I'm in a couple other fantasy leagues, and I'm noticing a lot of guys that I think are really smart owners are going and getting him right now, and it's because he's struggling. But Colt Keith is still a very high end bat. This is his rookie year. You know, these struggles, these slow starts, they're to be expected. And I really think that, Braxton kind of given up on him pretty quickly after getting him. It kind of shocked me a little bit. Shea Langoliers is a guy that's either going to hit 4 home runs or strike out 4 times. But as a catcher, I'll sign up for that all day. And Jose Soriano, who we've already mentioned, is pitching. I don't know if I would say like an ace, but like a definitely high end pitcher. And Braxton could really use a guy like that. So he gives all that away for a prospect in Mayer who is a lot of people kind of differ on their opinions of him. I think there's a lot of risk involved, but obviously you could get a big reward there. And Tyler Stevenson, who is definitely a lesser catcher than Langoliers. So I don't love this trade for Braxton personally, but Connor, I'll let you go. What's your thoughts with this move?
I have nothing to add to Cody's analysis. This might be my least favorite trade of the week. I think that Mayer, Stevenson, Langoliers, and 2 worse would have been it for Colt Keith. So the fact that Keith and Soriano went one way in the same deal is just a travesty.
Travesty's a good word there. Connor, Paul, I'll let you jump in. Do you differ? What do you think here, man?
No, I'm with you guys. For me, I think Marcelo Mayer has to pull a lot of weight in this trade, and I just don't think he does. and I don't think he will. So yeah, I don't have too much to add here. Tita just sniping trades left and right, I feel like, so far. So, but yeah, I like Mayer, but yeah, there's a lot of weight he'd have to pull here.
Absolutely. And there's a lot more left in this podcast, but I will say, as of right now, the podcast photo on the YouTube app is probably just going to be a picture of Tita. But we will see how the rest of the podcast goes before we determine that. We will move on now. This is interesting. It's small. We'll be quick on it, but I want to talk about it. Bracton gets George Springer and AJ Blue Balls. Tita gets Alex Verdugo. Again, I love this trade for Bracton. And I know that Verdugo has kind of gotten a little hype lately. I know last week on the podcast, I was kind of frowned upon for moving him for Andy Pahe. Say it, Connor. What's his last name?
Pahez?
Pahez, whatever. I kind of moved Verdugo for this is America. Andy Pages. And but now I'm not a Verdugo guy. There's not a lot in his game. Paul touched on it last podcast. The short porch and right at Yankee Stadium does help him, but I just don't love it. It's not a very exciting profile. 3-4 points a night seems to be like what he is. Yeah, he'll have a big game every now and again. Doesn't strike out a lot. That's definitely a point there. But Springer's a guy, I feel like whoever ends up with him when the bottle stops spinning is going to be really happy because, I know he's had a slow start to the season. But again, if I'm going to bet money, it's going to be that Springer's going to turn it around and be a very productive player as we start to approach the second half of the season. So, again, I'm going to go back and kind of tout Bracton up a little bit. I like this move for him. Paul, what do you think about this trade?
I think it's pretty even, to be honest. I don't hate it, I guess, for Tita as much as you do, or like it as much for Bracton. Because like an hour later, he traded Springer for Morales and Dalen Lyle, basically two worse. So it was two worse and blue ball for Verdugo. That's probably about right. Maybe it would have been two worse, would have been all right. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's pretty even because Verdugo and that short porch, it's not getting any longer. So he'll have it all year to hit to. So yeah, and I don't believe in George Springer as much as you do. I think he's a good player. I thought he was a really good player 5 years ago. If he wasn't in the mid 30s, then I'd like him a lot more. But time comes for everybody, and Father Time's undefeated. So I mean, it's not bad. I don't think either way. I think it's kind of just like okay, that trade just happened basically to me.
Okay, Connor, let me ask you this: did you, when the dust settled, did you walk away with George Springer?
I still have George Springer rostered.
Okay, and so your investment in him was basically two worst.
Yes.
Okay, what's your plans with George Springer? Announce them for the masses here.
Sure. I do have to admit that I find it fitting that Bracton got blue balls right after making the worst trade of the week potentially. But I do like George Springer. Two worth for an aging outfielder definitely is a risk, and I think Bracton might have. I can see why he cashed out, but at the same time, George Springer is a middle of the lineup or top lineup hitter for a very talented team that is going through some issues now. So, is there a chance that Springer depletes the point where I have to drop him? Sure. But is there a chance that he ends up being that 6 point per game bat that in a couple weeks I can flip for close to double what I paid for him? Absolutely. So my team has a line of outfielders, but Springer's not going to be one I'll be moving anytime soon because I want to see how a man with that track record plays out.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm going to jump some here because I got to get to this meaty one. If you're listening to this podcast, this is probably the one you've been waiting to hear discussed. Everyone had an opinion on this trade, and rightfully so. Paul gets his guy. Paul gets Jackson Holiday. Bracton gets Jason Dominguez, Ryan Weathers, Carson Williams, Thomas Sagis, and Bubba Chandler. Paul, I'm gonna let you go first here, man. You got your guy in Holiday, but you definitely paid up to get him. What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I definitely paid up to get him. Obviously, I like Jackson Holiday a lot. High potential to be one of my favorite players in baseball. But yeah, I gave up probably more than I wanted to at the end of the day. But for me, getting Jackson Holiday, like he's home. Like I messed up. Well, I didn't mess up because when I gave away Jackson Holiday, it was to get Gunnar Henderson. So not a loss in my book there. But I've missed him basically ever since. And he's been, traded around this league like crazy. I've just been sitting on the sidelines. But I was kind of tired of that. And Braxton came to me with a lower offer than I was anticipating because Braxton and I have been talking Jackson Holiday for feels like months. And obviously he's traded him away, got him back, this and that. I know that he's had a really slow start to his major league career. I know I think he's batting since he got sent back down to AAA. I think he's hitting around 230, 240, something like that. I still believe in him. I'm not going to quit him. He's only 20 years old. I think he's a superstar in the making, and he kind of needs to be because I think Jason Dominguez has a similar ceiling, but I think his floor is quite a bit lower. I think Carson Williams, I wouldn't say he has a similar ceiling. I think his ceiling's a little bit lower, but I think Carson Williams has potential star ability. And then to give up Ryan Weathers, who we mentioned before, I identified Ryan Weathers as a really good pitcher. He's only 24 years old. He was a first round pick. Like the dude's good. And I know I was made fun of, and it was, I self admitted it wasn't a very good trade when I moved Zeke Tovar for him straight up. But he is a good pitcher. Like, and pitching in this league matters, especially a 24-year-old pitcher. He had a really good start again tonight. So yeah, like again, it was a tough decision for me, but I also can't look back. What I want to do is collect really good players at various positions, and I think Jackson Holiday is a really good player.
And Connor, do you have any thoughts with this trade?
So I get it for both sides. Paul got his guy, and the price probably came down to a point where it wasn't going to get any better from that. I do think on principle, I like Bracton's side more because all of these players are very young and have the opportunity to pop off. So when there are 4 or 5 young, great assets for one, I will almost always lean towards the 4 or 5. But that said, Jackson Holiday has a chance to be an elite fantasy asset, and he and Gunnar are reunited for probably quite some time until I overpay for Gunnar eventually.
That's never happening.
Very interesting thoughts there. I'll talk a little bit about this trade. Really interesting deal for both sides. A little bit of transparency here. Both Paul and Bracton asked my opinion of this trade. Should they do it, or is it too much? Is it not enough? That kind of thing. And I told them both to do the deal. No, and I'm not saying that's why they did it. I'm just saying my opinion to Braxton was he should take that for Jackson Holiday, and my opinion to Paul was he should pay that for Jackson Holiday. And I kind of stand by that right now. I think the truth is there is absolutely no way to determine who won this trade. The only player in the deal that's going to play meaningful baseball this year is Ryan Weathers, most likely. So really, there's really no way to determine right now who's going to win this trade. It's this is going to be a down the road thing. But I will say this: I think Paul is in a position with assets to move these kind of assets to get a guy like Jackson Holiday. And I think Braxton needed this kind of influx of assets to a team that was depth starved after his Ellie trade and a few other trades that he made after that. So I really like it for both sides here. I think it really depends on what Braxton does with all these pieces that he got. That's going to tell, the difference in if it was worth it or not for him. And I think for Paul, you know, I think it comes down to this. I think Jackson Holiday is a guy clearly that he wanted. I think that's a big get for his team. And I think he got him for cheaper than he thought he was going to have to, pay to get him. So, I think Braxton came down to a reasonable price, so to speak, and Paul jumped at it. So, I said it when the trade went down in main chat. I think there is such thing as a good deal. I think there is such thing as a trade where both guys walk away happy. And I feel like this trade falls into that category. So definitely a league shaker trade for sure. We will move on now to Tita wins the Tanner Bibby sweepstakes and gets him for Colt Keith, Brock Wilkin, David Festa, and Logan Evans. I'll say real quick, there was a lot of talk when Tanner Bibby, Smell kind of posted him and was like, hey, I'm trading this guy tonight. Everybody jump in with offers. I never jumped in with an offer. I wasn't comfortable paying what I knew Smell would want for Bibby. Tita did. So pretty interesting to see here what he paid. Paul, what do you think about what Tita paid to get Tanner?
Yeah, so I did make an offer on Bibby, full transparency. I don't remember what it was, but I was shot down pretty quickly. And then Smell told me he was between two offers, and he told me that this is what Tita had offered. And I'll be honest, I was floored. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, to me, Tanner Bibby is a fine pitcher. I don't know that he's like an ace. And to me, that package screams ace pitcher. Cole Keith is a crazy good second baseman. Brock Wilkin is probably a top 5-ish third base prospect. We talked about Festa, and Logan Evans has been crazy on the rise this year. So yeah, I like what Smell got for Bibby. At the end of the day, I think Bibby's probably still the best player in the deal, and a pitcher at that, and that's kind of what Smell needs. So I get why he did it. Like, the value to me is something you can't turn down, but I'd rather Bibby be on Smell's team, if that makes sense, than not on Smell's team. But yeah, I get why he did it. It's all about value in this league and trying to gain as much as you can. And at the end of the day, I do like it for Smell. It's just, trading a pitcher like that, it's a tough thing to do.
And Connor, what were your thoughts with this move?
To the surprise of no one, I think that this is the W Smell. If you had replaced Tanner Bybee with a larger pitching name, I would not have been surprised.
I think Bibby's a talented guy in a good organization, but he's 25 and was a fifth-round pick, and I think there are questions of how long he can keep it up. So the fact that Colt Keith, who I think a lot of us are very high on, and Brock Wilken, who I know Tita is a very big fan of, and then you throw in David Festa, and then you throw in Logan Evans, two pitchers that are very clearly not worse. I think Smell got exactly what he was looking for when he acquired Bibby in the first place.
Absolutely. And I've just determined, we all try to get these podcasts down to around an hour. And as long as Tita is in this league, I think that's going to be impossible because it is just trade after trade after trade that deserves to be talked about. But guys, time management, we are going to skip down just a little bit here and get to another trade Tita was involved in. Tita gets Andres Jimenez, Pete Crow Armstrong, and Owen Murphy. Jab gets Tanner Bibby and Ryan McMahon. Really interesting move here. Again, you look into what Tita invested in Bibby and look what he got back out of him. You could debate that all day, what side you wanted. I'm just looking at this trade as it is. Pete Crow Armstrong is, obviously a very high-end prospect. He's up playing center field every day with the Cubs right now. Andres Jimenez, really solid second baseman, and Owen Murphy, who's been terrific this year in the Braves organization. Jab gets Bibby and Ryan McMahon. So we have talked about Jab needing pitching. He secures it in this deal, but I do think he paid, quite a pretty penny to do it. Paul, what do you think about this move?
Yeah, I kind of agree entirely there. I will note that, and maybe we'll talk about it in our next trade. Pete Armstrong definitely does not play everyday center field for the Cubs right now. I wish he did. I do like him a lot. Again, maybe we'll get into it. But yeah, the wheeling and dealing that Tita does, he wins some, loses some. For this one particularly, I don't know. Like, again, I'm not a big Bibby fan, so I don't know. It's hard to say that he won or lost this one because I'm really, other than PCA, I'm really not a big fan. Well, I guess Murphy too. So maybe he did win, but I'm not a big Jimenez fan. I'm not a big Bibby fan. I'm not really a big McMahon fan. So I guess I'll give the edge to Tita just because of the 5 players traded. The 2 that I like went to Tita. So yeah, I guess that's my analysis.
And Connor, any thoughts with this move?
I think this is the hardest trade to analyze this entire week. Bibby went for 2 elite prospects, and like 2 medium ones, and then he goes for an elite prospect, a second baseman, and let's call it a medium and Murphy, and then Ryan McMahon, who has consistently gone for 2 or 3 assets between Tita and I for weeks and weeks. So I think for bit-wise, I lean Jab here. For value-wise, I'm not entirely sure. Jimenez is not a profile I love, but he puts up the numbers. And Preco Armstrong is definitely a talented dude. So let's wait and see how these players turn out.
Yep. And 4 hours later, in my opinion, Paul catches Tita napping a little here. Paul gets Pete Crow Armstrong. Tita gets Chase Petty, Rainer Arias, a 2025 second and a 2025 third. Paul, what do you think about this move you made here to snag Pete Crow Armstrong?
I think I'm becoming Bracton, is my answer on that. So we all kind of made fun of Bracton for collecting all these young, talented prospects. I mean, obviously very talented, like Jackson Churio, number 1 prospect at the time, or number 2, maybe, to Jackson Holiday, who Bracton also had. So I mean, like, he was collecting all these young, talented players, and I feel like I'm doing the same thing right now. Trading for Jackson Holiday, trading for Pete Armstrong. I mean, I'd like to think that I have the older guys to kind of supplement that. That is kind of my thought process to, have the 28 and 29-year-olds and like a Randy Rosarena, Seiya Suzuki, like those type of players, and let these young guys kind of develop and get into their groove. That is kind of my thought process here. For me, specifically to this deal, Chase Petty is the one that I'll miss the most. Got him earlier in the week. I love Chase Petty. Everybody knows that I love Chase Petty. So yeah, he was the tough one to move. But for me, Rainer Arias is kind of a dart throw. He's only 18 years old. Definitely has impact bat potential. A lot of power. But he's also 18 years old, so he's a long way away from the big leagues. And then second and third round picks, those are kind of just dart throws as they are. I don't know how strong this draft class is coming up. I think it's a little bit weaker than last year's. So I think those picks are a little bit less value than they would be normally. So overall, I was very comfortable paying those 4 assets for what I at least think could be maybe not 30-30, but I think 20-30, definitely possible for PCA. What I do know is that his glove is good enough to play every day. I know he's not playing every day right now, just because when you have an outfield that's Ian Happ, Cody Bellinger, and Seiya Suzuki, pretty hard to find your place in that group. But I know that if there happens to be any sort of injury to any of those guys, or maybe they'll finally get Talkman out of the DH role and put somebody there and let PCA take more regular at bats. That's kind of my hope. But yeah, overall, very comfortable to do this deal. To have a minor league system that now features Jackson Holliday, Junior Caminero, Kobe Mayo, and PCA. I am pretty satisfied with that.
For sure. And we will skip down now as we move through. There's so many trades to talk about. We just can't get to all of them. But I do want to get to this one Connor made on Saturday night. Connor gets Roderick Arias, Heston Kjerstad, a 2026 second, and another 2026 second. And Dave gets Jordan Montgomery. Connor, what are your thoughts with this move, knowing where your matchup was in the week, but getting what I think is a nice haul for Jordan Montgomery? What do you think with this trade?
Yeah, so I think Paul mentioned if I had bean smell, it was I would have been 3-4 and potentially like the 9 seed for the playoffs. But at 9:55 p.m., Smell also had an 150-point night, and my lead for 90 was close to 10, with Smell having 2 starts going against me. Bryce Elder, I would not know, had a minus 15, and Alek Manoah, I was very nervous that he would have a powerful start. So Montgomery, I knew that since there were 1 or 2 other matchups open, I was going to command a hefty price for him. And Dave's been looking for pitching, so I think the matchup worked. I would like to develop my pitching and be a competitor in this league sooner than later, but the asset value that my team will have for later this year or next year when maybe the corner really gets turned, I thought was too good to turn down and risk the eventual loss to Smell in the Good Boy Bowl.
For sure. And Paul, any thoughts with this move here?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of said it earlier in Connor's matchup breakdown that I was disappointed a little bit that he didn't hang on to Montgomery, make a go at beating Smell. I mean, the return isn't the worst. I mean, 2 prospects, 2 picks for Jordan Montgomery. That's probably about right. Especially Arias and Kjerstad. I know both of them have pretty high name value. I mean, with Kjerstad, my fear is that he's becoming this quad A outfielder. I know that's probably more a factor of the Orioles having good outfield versus Kerstad's ability. But at the end of at some point, he has to be able to stick on this roster, and he has to be able to get at bats, and he's just not. And I don't know if it's a Brandon Hyde thing, not managing it the best, or what. But something's got to give, and it's got to give. It's got to give sooner than later because he's already 25. And there's post hype guys, but this is probably post hype at this point. So yeah, I mean, again, like I said, that's probably about the right value for a guy like Montgomery. But again, last time I'll say it, I promise, Connor. I just wish that he would have went for the win.
Yeah, for sure. Very interesting to kind of chalk it up with you guys about these trades here. That will wrap up the trade review for the week. I know we left out several trades, guys, but we're trying to keep this thing under 4 hours, and Tita does exist. So we will move on now to the final segment of the podcast, the Week 8 preview. And this looks to be a really, really interesting week. None more interesting to me than John Haidt and the Hartford Yard Goats taking on Hen Dogs, Clearwater Beach Dogs. Who wins and why, Paul?
Yeah, by far, this is the matchup of the week, I think. Yeah, this is a crazy. I mean, we're obviously recording Monday night, so we've seen the results for day one. The score is already 151 to 149. Just for reference, there isn't another team in the entire league that has 100 points yet. So I mean, these two teams are heading for 800 to 800 type scores. Man, this, it's a tough one to call. I will say that. I mean, it seems like John Haidt has the pitching advantage simply because he's got Barrios, Stroman, and Framber Valdez all on 2-start weeks versus Hendog, who only, it looks like, has Chris Sale. I'm going to go with John Haidt. He's been hot. But yeah, I think both of these teams get at least over 700, potentially close to 800.
And Connor, who wins this matchup and why?
So going into the week, I would have definitely said Haidt. The Colin Cowser deal definitely makes me think that if there is a close matchup, Haidt would need to make the corresponding adjustment. What I think scares me, or why I'm leaning Hen now with the foresight of seeing today, is that Haidt's already used 3 starts. The fact that he has 151 points when Framber went minus 12 is absolutely wild. But 3 starts versus 1 against a team to the caliber of Hen's is nothing to laugh at. So if Hen acquires another pitcher, he gets his 2 starts later in the week and they aren't complete duds, it does seem like he does have an advantage in the matchup. So I slightly lean Hen, but it's tough to bet against the defending champion.
For sure, yeah, this matchup's going to come down to it. I think the way it ended on Monday night, 151 to 149, is going to kind of be the tale of the week. I think it's going to be really close, but I'm also going to go with Hen Dog. I'm going to go with the matchups too. I think Haidt's only going to have 7 or 8 starts remaining this week, and I think Hen Dog's going to be able to get to 11. So I am going to give Hen Dog the advantage in this matchup, but it will be close. The next matchup, another one that's definitely got playoff implications. Bry's Rocky Mountain Vibes take on the Norfolk Tides. Paul, this is your matchup. It's neck and neck after Monday, 89 to 88. Paul, what do you think? Who wins and why?
Yeah, another, I think, real tight matchup, I think, for the whole week. I'm going to say 2 things before I give any sort of prediction. Number one, if you look at last week's score, I beat Bry by 1 point. Just throwing that out there. Kind of an indicator of how tight it will be. But I also wanted to say that Julio Rodriguez trade, I haven't lost. I'm 4-0. And now I get to face good old J-Rod with Bry's team. Having said all of that, putting it all together, I'd love to pick me. I really would. I'm going to take Bry. I just think that his pitching is better than mine. Don't get me wrong, I do like my pitching, but like guys like George Kirby, I have no idea what I'm going to get. Crochet, he's been really, really solid of late, but he's known to throw up a clunker. Kyle Bradish, same thing. Like, working his way back from injury, it's the same thing. Where am I going to get 30 or am I going to get 5? And then my bullpen. I don't know if my bullpen's good enough to beat him. Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm going to try, but I would favor Bry in this one.
And Connor, who wins this matchup and why?
Bry's going to win because the team's more developed. If this matchup happened next year and Pete Crow Armstrong and Jackson Holiday were full-time forces, I think that would push them over. But I think Paul has moved a lot of resources into the big players that'll help next year. So I do think that Bry is going to just have the horses to win this week.
Yeah, this one's tough for me. Paul's team has been on fire lately, but you also know that Bry is just going to throw the kitchen sink at you with any resource he possibly can. I'm going to go with a hot hand, and I'm going to say Paul wins, but it's going to be really, really close. And I'm just going to ride Paul's team until someone can knock him off from this 4-game win streak. I think he's going to secure the victory this week versus Bry. But again, I think this matchup is going to come down to maybe 10, 15 points differential. So we will move on now and talk about the Scott's Richmond Flying Squirrels take on Dave's Rochester Red Wings. Both these teams have been just knocking on the door week in and week out of getting wins. Now they face off. Somebody's going to win this week. Paul, who wins and why?
So for me, I think the question is Scott back in town? Is he able to access his roster? Because if not, then I don't think he wins. If he is, though, if he's able to actively manage his team, I do think he can beat Dave. But obviously Dave's gonna throw everything he's got at him, and if Scott can't clear 500 points, then Dave I think takes this one pretty easily. But obviously if Scott's around, if he can get his lineup set and all that, then I think Scott's got a pretty good chance.
And Connor, who wins and why?
Dave's going to win this matchup because of shrewd pitching acquisitions. He got James Paxton for worst. I hate Paxton's profile, but getting a pitcher with that team and the points amount is terrific, and I think Dave's only going to add. Scott has been a bit more conservative with his pitching addition, so I think that if it's close, Dave is going to strike again and get that piece he needs. But I do think that this is going to be very telling for the potential 7 seed of the playoffs connotations.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, go off what you said, Connor. Dave's gonna win this because of James Paxton. I think the difference in this matchup will be Dave getting James Paxton for a worst last night and sniping me. I was very much planning to jump on that. Dave beat me to it, and I think it's going to be enough to get him a win this week. We will move on now to Chad's Oklahoma City 89ers take on Smells El Paso Chihuahuas. Connor, who wins this week and why?
Chad's going to win this because I think he almost has to. Smells already used, or both GMs have already used 2 starts, and Chad has a 20-point advantage, but Chad is 3-4. The difference between 4-4 and 3-5 in a league this competitive is massive. So I do think that Chad might make a savvy move or two, and Smell is completely fine just being in asset collection mode. So I think Chad's going to win, but this could be a fun one.
Yeah, Chad has Paul Skeens now, and he's going to win this matchup. Paul, what do you think about this?
Paul Skeens throws no hitters this week against the Giants. That's my prediction. And obviously, because of that, Chad's going to win.
We will be tuned in to see if Paul can see the future. Okay, moving on now to Jab's Portland Sea Dogs after a tough loss last week. Gets Bracton's Bismarck Larks. Connor, who wins this matchup and why?
Jab wins the matchup because he just got off a tough loss for height and has the pitching horses that Bracton doesn't.
Yes, Jab's team is just too much for Bracton to take on at this point in time. I'm sure Jab's going to be around 660, 680, 700 points. And I just don't think Bracton can get there with the team as currently constructed. So Jab will win this matchup. Paul, who wins and why?
Yeah, Jab wins. I'm just really sad looking at Ryan Weathers dropping 36 points tonight. So I'm just going to be over here in my corner.
Rightfully so. And moving on now to Connor's matchup. Tita, the Nashville Sounds take on Connor Sod Poodles. Interesting Monday. Tita with 3 starts, Connor with 2. It's 90-79. Tita does have the early advantage there, but he used one more pitcher to do it. Connor, who wins this matchup and why?
I think Tita wins, but there is a lot of optimism for my team. The one start is definitely a big deal, and Tita only has 3 waiver claims remaining. It is Monday night. So if he hits with those waiver claims, I'm probably screwed. But I think that if I am able to make smart adjustments and Xander Bogaerts was injured, so the left side of my infield doesn't completely crumble, I think I can put up a very competitive matchup. So I think that Tita beat me relatively comfortably last time. That will not be the case. I think this is going to be a 50-pointer.
And Paul, who wins and why?
So, question for Connor. I mean, I think if Tita is the biggest trader in this league, you're definitely probably number 2. And you guys trade with each other just a ton. I mean, I think this offseason you made like a trade with each other for like 30 straight days or something or whatever it was. Are you going to make any deals with Tita this week?
I already have. I traded Brendan Lau to him for 2 worse. And while that could absolutely blow up in my face, I'm happy with starting Michael Busch at second, and he has Andres Jimenez. So I'm not sure how much that could impact the current matchup. So if Tita, I try to be given my team state in very strict, like best asset mode. So if Tita offers the best deal, I probably do it. But I do think I have a good shot of winning this week, dealing with him or not.
Gotcha. So for my prediction, I think this will be a close one. I think you'll both be around 600. I'm gonna lean Tita just because of that last part that you said there. That I mean, it's obviously it's your prerogative, and I don't have a problem with it. But if you make a deal where you give away, I don't want to pick out a certain player, but if you make a deal where you give away a pro for a good pick or a spec package, then that might, as it did last week, it might turn the tide towards Tita. So I'll lean Tita. But again, I think this is probably both of you guys will be around 600.
Yeah, for me, I think this is a matchup where these two teams are closer on paper than you might assume. However, I do think Connor's goal right now is to, acquire as many, minor league assets in terms of picks and prospects as possible. to just use his ammo to get where he wants to be, where Tita is more winning focused based on where his team sits. So I would say that, Tita's definitely going to be working every angle as possible like he does every week to win this matchup. But I do think as the rosters are currently constructed, this thing's going to be close. But I will give the advantage this week to Tita. But it will be interesting because if Connor beats him, I think that would be 3 losses in a row for Tita, maybe even 4. The level of what he will do to his team will make for a 6-hour podcast. So, really interesting to see what will happen with that matchup. And the last matchup of week 8 that we will preview is my Hot Rods versus Homco's Trash Pandas. I will go first. I'm going to lose this matchup by 19 points. Paul, you go. Who wins and why?
Cody's going to win this matchup by like 200 points is the actual answer. I mean, yeah, like I know you're doing like you're a hold down on your team thing. I get it. You didn't score 1,000 points last week, but yeah, I mean, and again, Hamko is getting screwed, I think, by the schedule. I don't know the last time he played a team where, well, I guess they don't really exist anymore in this league. I mean, Smell drops whatever he dropped last week and got a win. So I don't know that there is a quote unquote easy win left in this league. So again, like I don't know the last time Hamko played a team where it's like, oh yeah, he has a pretty good shot to win this one. So yeah, I mean, again, Cody's gonna win. He'll probably get close to 700, like he normally does, and we'll be back here in a week, and he'll still be bitching about his team. So,
and Connor, who wins this matchup and why?
As much as Cody likes to complain about his team, he's going to win by 100 points. I do think and hope that Humko's going to have another shakeup, and Lords just hit a bomb. Maybe this is the week he turns it around, but Cody's all-around team is probably just too much.
And that will conclude the week 8 preview and wrap up the podcast. So it was great to talk to you guys this week about week 7 and all the trades that went down. Guys, if you had trades that we didn't get to, we're sorry. It's a lot of trades go on in this league on a weekly basis, but we do try to get to all of them. So it was good to talk it with you guys. Paul, any final words as we head into week 8?
I just want to stress again that I'm undefeated since I made my speech, my Danny Hurley speech. I was 0-3 at the time, made my speech, and I'm 4-0 since. I'm just getting that in now because I don't think I'm going to beat Bry. So it's nice to say it now, before I take this loss. But yeah, I'm looking forward, obviously to the week. I'm looking forward to doing this all again there.
And Connor, any final words as we head into week 8?
I think this is going to be a good week for my team. Of all of the great GMs in this league, I do look forward to my matchups with Tita, maybe the most, given the trading styles and how close they seem to be. But just chatting through all of these, there's so many close matchups. There are no easy bumps on the schedule for the most part. I think it speaks to how competitive the league is, and I think that's only going to keep going as the teams get more and more developed. I think a lot of new GMs came in last year, and as they grow the teams more and more, this league's only going to get better. So look forward to seeing where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys touched on it, man. The league is very, very competitive right now. Paul mentioned that, there's really no matchup where you can just guarantee a win. You talk about Smell's situation and his team, if Alec Manoa is back and he can rehab Hunter Brown and he there's definitely some guys in place there where Smell can win on any given week. You know, Bracton's offense is loaded with stars. Ellie De La Cruz is going to steal 120 bases this year. You know, we talked about the pitching that Dave's brought in. You know, the work Cole's done, the work Scott's done. That's the bottom of the league. And so, you know, really, really interesting, you know, as the season progresses at, you know, how everything plays out. And yeah, I do want to say, I do not complain about my team all the time, okay? But when Joe Jimenez throws up minus 19 in a stream, I have every right to be a little disgruntled, okay? And it feel like it's going to cost me the matchup because that's just the way things happen. But yeah, so definitely interesting. Team is still undefeated. I'm definitely proud of that. John Height overtook me tonight for number one in points scored. He's got me about 30 points now on the season. That's been kind of a long time coming. He like every week. I had like week 3, I was up on him by like 400 points, and he's just kind of like pecked that off week in and week out. So Hyde has taken over number one in scoring, but I still got him on record 7-0 to 6-1. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm not sure when I play him, but I know it's coming up at some point. But that will wrap up the week 7 podcast, and we will be back this time next week to talk it up with you guys about the results of week 8. So thank you for listening in. We will see you guys next time.